Okay, we are back. Adam and I are super excited on this second part of a three-part series on Marian apparitions. And Adam, if you could just real quickly just reintroduce our wonderful guest, Ted Flynn. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. I would like to ask Ted about the visionary that passed away, if she knew the year, and I'm curious to see if she shared that like we were talking about yesterday. Did she put that in a sealed envelope before she died or anything of that nature? Kind of the specifics of this, because I think now that these Marian apparitions and different warnings are going around the internet like crazy by various people that are claimed to be mystics, which is can be a beautiful thing and can be very wonderful to hear. However, it also can be very confusing, and so we wanted to make sure we took care of it here on the Next Right Thing and to clear up any confusion on these Marian apparitions. But why don't you quickly reintroduce our wonderful guest, Ted Flynn?
Sure. So yeah, Ted Flynn, friend of the show, he's with us for, well, this 3-day segment is the second time he's been with us. He's a best-selling author, a popular speaker. He has been studying these issues, many different issues about apparitions and saints and prophecy, spiritual warfare going on in history, throughout history, kind of between good and evil. He's been looking at this stuff for 40 years, and I believe is trying to bring a balanced and kind of detailed and very facts-based approach to it, which I really appreciate. He's traveled a lot. He's worked in many projects. He's, spoken more than 1,000 times over the years. So Ted is a really valuable resource.
And also a great author. So you can pick up his books at sign.org or Amazon. So yesterday we kind of got cut off because we had to send it back to Keith, Ted, and we're so glad you're back with us for the part 2 of this. And go back to Mari Loli that passed away. She knew the year. Did she leave any instructions before she left this earth?
Not that I know of. It's never come up, but it really wasn't that sensitive in terms of her announcing the warning in advance. She died in 2009 in April of complications from lupus, and she was very, very unassuming. Just a very, very humble woman, went to Mass and the people for many, many, many years in her own parish in Massachusetts, including her parish priest, didn't even know who she was. So this is the type of life they lived. And I think there's actually a lesson in that for all of us today with what you just alluded to with the confusion. And so, but Mari Loli was not going to announce the miracle in advance, so she was not sensitive that she was alive. So all of these things are still authentic, even though she's passed. But it would cause a great deal of confusion and many, many people falling away. For sure, if Conchita in New York were to pass away before she announced the miracle 8 days in advance. And you can just imagine how with the internet, how this will absolutely go like wildfire. This will be the biggest news in the world that after everybody has experienced the warning, because there's never, ever in history ever been an event like this where it was announced in advance, where every single person in the world will experience the exact same thing. And from the people that I've spoken to over the years that have these interchangeable phrases or words, judgment in miniature, life review, illumination of conscience, is used most. It's more descriptive than even, quote, the warning. But they all mean the same thing.
So
it's a day that nobody will ever forget.
So you mentioned before that in the old taxonomy of rulings, the old list of rulings that the church could give on apparitions, they had approved, leave it alone, or condemned. And that would be made by the local bishop primarily, unless they asked Rome for help. But ultimately, the local bishop, I think, would be the one to make that statement. Now, you mentioned that we're in a leave it alone phase. consistently. It's never been condemned, but it's in a leave it alone phase. Help me see if I'm clear on this. Does the church tend to give it the leave it alone ruling when things haven't fully played out yet, and so full judgment can't yet be made? Is it because we're waiting for this to possibly happen, the church is going to reserve judgment until all the facts are in? Is that right?
Absolutely. That is actually the answer. If I were Pope and I had the ability, and I'm very, very fond of this, of all of the apparitions in world history, as I like to say, this is my pet. I've been around many, many of them. I've been to many of the sites globally, but this is the one that excites me the most for many, many, many reasons, historically, scripturally, the magisterial teaching, the types of messages giving. But ultimately, the reason is this is God's love and mercy to a humanity that has completely, completely gone off the rails into an area of grievous, grievous sin. And frankly, at the moment, we are a world collectively lost. So the church has left this alone in their prudence. There have been bishops in Santander, which is where the bishop sits for Garabandal. It's right on the Bay of Biscay, about an hour drive from Garabandal. It's a fairly large metropolitan city, frankly, and it's very, very beautiful to boot. But we have 7 bishops who have had different of opinion all of the way from not liking it at all to absolutely leaving it alone to very, very supportive. But all of them have all left it alone, and there has never been a negative judgment or condemnation. So I don't think the commissions in the church have ever done, or for the most part have not done, a good job investigating apparitions, and including this one. It was very insufficient, and all of the data is there the way these were investigated as in essence shabbily done. And that is the historical truth on that in the last 60 years. But they have all left it alone. So there is nothing improper or not according to canonical law where people cannot visit it, including even bishops from Santander have actually celebrated Mass in the village.
Okay.
So before anybody wants to call their bishop about what your radio station is producing, it's all kosher.
Right. And it's not that the church is mean and there's a conspiracy to suppress Garabandal and, all this kind of dramatic stuff that sometimes people say. They're actually being reasonable because it hasn't all played out yet.
And I think it's very prudent of the church because, the integrity of these messages have to be for the following generations. Mm-hmm. And that if the church rules, and usually many, many times they wait, not always, never say never, never say always, but many times they wait for the people to pass to see if it has all come true and if there's been any scandal in their life. We know Fatima was approved very, very early before Sister Lucy died, and there's been other apparitions like that. But I think the church waiting is very, very wise to see if it plays out. So it's preserving magisterial teaching into the next generations, plural.
Wow. Okay, this is fantastic stuff, and I wish we had a whole week with you, Ted, but we only have the rest of today and tomorrow. So for our listeners that just tuned in, if you're not sure what we're talking about, it's about Garabandal and Marian apparitions, and tomorrow we'll be talking about the document that came out from the Vatican about the new norms on the miraculous and the supernatural with our guest, Ted Flynn. He has been studying this and working in this area for 40 years. So if you want to learn more about Garabandal, please pick up his book, Garabandal, The Warning and the Great Miracle by Ted Flynn. You can get it at sign.org or Amazon. Or if you just want just a brief understanding of Garabandal, check out our YouTube channel at GRN Online for yesterday's segment, and you'll hear Ted explain Garabandal a little bit better for the rest of us. But we're going to have to send it back to Keith in a moment, Adam, and I'm hoping we get to a little bit more about the messages, what we need to know today, what's going on today on social media, because they're kind of spinning it in a way, and they're using Garabandal and bringing it in on certain things. And some people who are going out on different podcasts are saying, well, this is how it connects with Garabandal, and this is going to be the projected date or time. And I think this can be very dangerous, very confusing for the laity. And so Ted is going to help us understand it better. But Ted, real quickly, something you said yesterday really, I can't stop thinking about it. You talked about the Blessed Mother at Garabandal talking about the suppression of the Mass, and saying, and you looked up the word, what did that mean? And it had to do with like a tearing apart, right, of the Mass. I'd like you to just make it. Was that a vague reference to Vatican II, or I know you talked about it yesterday, but I just want to make sure in your work and research on this, was there some kind of connection to Vatican II? Because I know today people are making that connection. So I just want to make sure we clear that up. Okay, 1 minute to go. Any quick comments, and we'll send it back to Keith.
Vatican II was not mentioned in the vein that I think you're alluding to.
Okay.
I don't actually project my own view on this. I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember Sergeant Joe Friday of the movie Dragnet, where he would show up at a crime scene and he'd say, "Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts."
Right.
So I don't get into projecting. In one of the beauty of the way heaven chooses these pure instruments that are very, very young, they're not wise enough, they're not smart enough, they're not learned enough, they're not theologians, they're not philosophers. Heaven many times takes these young pure souls to convey a divine message. So in terms of was Vatican II alluded to? No, other than it specifically said that the Mass would be suppressed. So that was a message at Garabandal.
So Ted, you mentioned when we first started talking about Garabandal yesterday that there was between 2,000 and 3,000 kind of messages or interactions with the girls. That's staggering. So the first thought that I think a lot of people are having is, was it all written down? Can I go somewhere and read, this large volume of all these things that were said? And secondly, if you've studied, I presume that you've read most of these or read lots of interviews with them. If you could sum it up, and I know that's a lot to ask, but if you could do the 10 Commandments and sum up the whole Torah, so to speak, like the old exercise that Jesus did a number of times, if you were going to sum up those messages, what would you say they are?
You just went into a compound sentence. I focus more on me being the Torah here for 10 points. What was the first one?
So the first one is, did they write everything down or most of it? And can we go read it?
Great question. Adam, you're on your game here asking these questions because they're very, very prudent questions. No, they did not. And that's part of the issue. Let's go back to 1961 in a very, very simple village where the Queen of Heaven and Earth, the Mother of the Son, the Daughter of the Father, the Spouse of the Holy Spirit, the Queen of Heaven and Earth, the Immaculate Conception, literally shows up to 4 young children in a mountain, remote, simple village. There was no preparation for all of this. It just happened. And by and large, if you take a look over the 52 months, 4 years and 4 months where the Blessed Mother came, in a number of times that they really don't know. Sometimes she would speak to one individually, sometimes the 2, sometimes the 3, sometimes collectively. And so one of the reasons and sometimes in the book on very, very serious matters, it appears as if I'm being redundant on where I'm really not. But the language is similar, but it's said in a different way because the young visionary will project it in a different way according to the way they heard it. But by and large, the number of messages that were actually recorded at Garabandal are very, very, very few. And by and large, the vast number of the messages came out anecdotally over time. They weren't written down. They didn't go into, in essence, an office. This is what the Blessed Mother said today. It would be found out later. If you want to get into the Ten Commandments on the book, there's a book called "She Went in Haste to the Mountain" by a Father Pescara, which I consider the Bible on Garabandal. It's very, very big. I mean, my book is 324 pages to make it readable, to where I tried to do the PowerPoint and the most salient messages. But if somebody is looking for an incredibly deep dive, it was a priest, Father Pescara, OFM, from Spain, who gave an exhaustive account of what took place there. And that's the book that I quote the most. And I got a lot of my information from the Garabandal magazine and the Garabandal journal that has been printing on this for literally to this very day on Garabandal. So they're basically printing a lot of the same messages because there isn't anything new unless it's told by Conchita or another person to something that they never released. And even Conchita actually spoke to her bishop. He never said what it was about the warning and specifically the miracle. And the bishop said, if these girls, she was a young girl, and the bishop never released what the miracle was. And he said to his secretary, if these girls are not insane, this is the greatest event since the resurrection. So this is a very, very significant thing.
So I'm going to try to press you just one last time. If you were to say, pick 2 or 3 themes that are common in the messages, for instance, repentance, or the world falling away from prayer and the faith, or another war is going to come that'll be a chastisement, like, some of the Fatima messages. Is there kind of a few general themes that are common amongst the Garabandal messages?
100%, and I get into those. After almost every single apparition, the Blessed Mother asked the young girls to pray for priests. Priests are a central part of all of this. Okay. Another one is the importance of the Eucharist, central, continually spoken of. And the other is the importance of fidelity in marriage, to a good marriage and a good family. If there were probably 3 things that I think are the most important, that's it. There are many, many other subsections, subtitles in essence to that, but the absolute importance to the Eucharist, family, and the priesthood. So now, as a Catholic, a cradle Catholic, lifelong, observant the whole time, never even left it in high school or college, I'm having a very, very hard time with people who are very negative to some of this, with just that simple core message of the absolute rubrics and the most essential pieces and parts of our Catholic faith. The Eucharist, the centrality of it, the importance of marriage, and praying for priests and getting good priests. So I've always struggled with trying to find the radical message in these main messages.
Well, we only have 2 minutes and we need to send it back to Keith. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the new document that came out from the Vatican on Marian apparitions, on the supernatural and the miraculous. So that's important. And Ted will be with us for the final part of this 3-part series. But be thinking about this, Adam and Ted, because, that's where I kind of zeroed in on the word of suppression, right? What's going to happen with the Mass. And then the messages, Adam, you picked up on and Ted shared about the Eucharist and praying for vocations and the family. And so that's very important. So I want to ask Ted this tomorrow. Here's another in suspense we're going to leave our listeners. But I want to ask Ted tomorrow, Adam, about to me, this is like the mass is people are leaving the faith. People are not accepting the Eucharist as that Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. So that's where the mass is being destroyed, right? And so the Blessed Mother is saying, please, you've got to pray more. You've got to keep this going. And so I want to ask Ted that tomorrow, if that's okay with you, Adam. And I think this is a very good, healthy discussion to clear up any of the misunderstandings and the things that are being conveyed over social media with these current day so-called mystics that think that they have the date and things and the messages, and they're tying it into Garabandal, and that could be very, very confusing. So that's why we brought Ted Flynn back. And we got to send it back. Tim just gave us the 30-second mark. Any final comments, Adam, before we send it back to Keith?
No, just that this has been really helpful so far. I hope people are enjoying it. It's helped my thinking on this topic, and I think it's good to get into these details, and it's good to ask these tougher questions, because a lot of people bring just kind of emotion and their own thoughts to it, and I like Ted's approach of dealing with the facts.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. I'm really enjoying this week.
Well, he's written several books, so if you want one of his books, especially on Garabandal, go to sign.org. For now, we'll send it back to Keith tomorrow, our final, The Next Right Thing, with our wonderful guest, Ted Flynn.